Aha, miigwech. Abujo kinawea, tam gamatuki egg, nishna bemwin jina. Minogiizhgad nin, mjikandoda, minwa Bkejwanong dun shaba, nishna ben dao, minwa apchikwa mamikwenda mampia ya. Minwa nishna bemwin akinamagasa dao. Do kweja apchitun, nishna bemwin ensigishgad. So I just like to say hello to everyone, bonjour, and my name is Minogiizhgad, as was stated earlier, and I come from this place called Bkejwanong, which in our language refers to where the waters divide. And I've been asked to share a bit about some of the journey that our community has been on in regards to language reclamation and revitalization. And so we do have a vast story to tell in that regard, in that sense, in that context. But I'll work towards providing you with a timeline of activities that we're kind of really proud of internally that we took. A lot of challenges, and there's still many more challenges we're anticipating, but that just goes with the territory. So without further ado, I'll get right into it because we don't have a lot of time. And I'm going to attempt here to share my screen. We've gone through the exercise earlier, so I should be okay. So I guess first of all, how I'd like to start is kind of just in regards to what we see here on this first slide. So our current school is our immersion program that was in development about 10 years ago, a decade ago. And through the course of time, a lot of conversation had taken place prior, starting at 2001. And when we got to this point to really take some aggressive steps to build capacity with our language programming, there had been a number of thoughts that had came about with our community elders, our first speakers, that kind of indicated we needed to have a shared vision that we could utilize, that we can share, that we can speak to, that'll help us remind us, of what it is that we're doing. And we have a language champion, an elder in our community. Her name is Rita Sands, who's been teaching language for the most part of her life, I would say all her life. And she had shared this piece with all of us. She just said, because I was asked of her, what is it that keeps you going, doing this type of work, and you're still doing it, and we're so grateful for that. And that's how she responded. So our language will live, and that's really the time that we all kind of were set back by that when she shared that, and we said, "Mio, that's it. That's the shared vision that we all have when it comes to our language and our culture." So that's kind of the language that's used in our classes to remind each other that the work that we're doing is to do just that. So our language will live. So back in 2001, this was even before I really started to take some serious language learning opportunities. A program within our community had initiated and pulling interested language speakers together to start a group that they referred to as the Anishinaabe Language Advisory Group. And so this group consisted primarily, and does still consist primarily of elders, learners, and what they do is they look at where the language is, some of the history, they tell stories, and then they come up with project ideas, initiatives to help inspire people to learn the language, to connect with the language, all these wonderful things. And what they had found was that a lot of the things that they were coming up with involved a lot of work, and were referencing our elders. So they were really hoping to have some younger people involved to help these projects take off. My involvement personally started to come in around 2005. And so I was really honored to be a part of that circle, to be asked to be a part of the circle. And they had noticed my interest, and that's kind of how that came to be with my involvement with this. And so I seen and participated in a lot of those projects, those initiatives, and I started to notice myself that really, if we're looking at providing fluent speakers, I think a lot more has to be done. We need to understand the reality that it is that we're facing. So although the evening language classes within the community were being offered, um, uh, language classes within our community library, um, initiatives that provide little opportunities for people to hear languages were being offered. They're all great, and they all contribute to the overall effort. But if the goal is to acquire fluency, what is it that we need to be looking at more serious? And that was immersion programming. We all understood and we all identified with how that is an important part of this journey that we need to really start to focus on. So in 2007, our community, through our Anishinaabe Language Advisory Group, had formed a subcommittee that they referred to as the Language Planning Task Force. So this was a younger group that started to brainstorm, develop strategic planning sessions, to really look at some of the work that we can be focusing on and develop this framework to help guide us through the future days to come. And so what we had done was we had discovered that we need to find out how the community feels about our language and culture. And so we developed a language survey, a comprehensive language survey that went out through the community. And so this was supported by our leadership, and they had funded the project to conduct this survey. And all the information that was gathered from it was tallied and studied, and to help us, to guide us, to ensure that the next steps that were to take, addresses how people in the community felt. So naturally, just as we had hoped, everybody felt that the language revitalization efforts was a top priority. And then so we needed a little bit more to kind of help us with ensuring that this effort hasn't been forgotten, and this is truly something that we're all on the same page with. And so we says, let's develop a language declaration that our leadership will take, and we would utilize that to help us with our journey forward here. So in 2008, our leadership of the day had endorsed and signed the language declaration to help us with our revitalization efforts. There was a lot of discussion and planning, that goes into a declaration. If these are things that you yourselves are endeavoring in your communities, there's not just a one size fits all. This will be something that is unique to use, your people within your community, the place where you live. And so they differ from place to place. One of the things that, as an example, one of the things that we had tussled with in that development of the language declaration was the last item on there. And it was just between establishing if we choose to look at having our language spoken as the first language, or if we have our language looked at as being the primary language of our community. So just those two different areas, it really spawned a lot of conversation because there was a number of people that felt strongly that it should stay. It should be worded in such a format where it says that our goal is to have our language as the first language spoken in our community. And then we had the other side of the fence where people had said, no, it should be something that says the direction we want to go is to have our language as a primary language. And so in the end, it was the primary language that was chosen, and it was in consensus, but it did require a lot of time, and as appropriately so. Because if we look at the languages today in our community, what is the primary language? It is English. So even though we have first speakers that grew up in the language, that are fluent in their language, the primary language is still English. We want the primary language to be Anishinaabe, so that's kind of the premise of where that conversation went. So in talking with the other First Nations peoples across Turtle Island, it's always interesting to see where communities go in their journeys. So after the declaration was established, there was a big piece that identified the percentage of our fluent speakers, our first speakers in our community was under 1%. So of our total membership, we were looking at under 1% first speakers that we had left. That was around 35 speakers. So the first speakers in our community had taken our membership roll, and they had gone through all of these members, and they established who they knew as a first speaker, and that's how that process went there. And it was around 35 speakers. Today, Nakoda, we're looking at 14. So we have 14. We just went through another exercise looking at these numbers here, because it brings a real reality to the forefront as well. Time is of the essence, and these are things that I'm sure everybody realizes and understands, on that same token. So we needed to build capacities. That was something that was also on the forefront. And if we're looking at immersion programming, it would be a bit much to expect our elders to be in a school environment all day, every day, that type of thing. So can we look at people that are prepared, willing to commit, their lives to learn in the language? And we had proposed a 4-year immersion language program for adults, and partnered with the University of Ottawa to have the participants acquire their Ontario certification for teaching. And so that was a part of the 10-year vision, starting in 2010 to the leadership of the day, whereby once the completion of this adult immersion program had come, then would be the start of our immersion program for early years, starting at junior kindergarten. So it was a 4-year adult immersion program for the adults, and there was 20 participants that joined in, and of the 20, there was 14 or 15 that was able to acquire their teaching certifications. And the understanding was that directly after its completion, we would start with our kindergarten level. And then even with that in our community, within our Anishinaabe Language Advisory Group, Language Planning Task Force, it was a discussion on where do we start? Where are we going to start with the young ones? Are we going to start at the daycare level, so the early years, or are we going to start at the JK level? And in the end, it was decided that we'll start with the JK at that level. In hindsight now, we're looking at, even earlier. So the benefits that will provide our school, our Anishinaabe Gelgamek learning is they're coming into the junior kindergarten fully fluent in English. So if there's an opportunity that we can even help with that process by providing it to their earlier years at daycare level, then this is something we'd like to explore and are currently doing. So not without its struggles, we didn't get the program off the ground right after the Minogiizhgad adult immersion program had started. We had had a year to do what we can to do some development, work with the existing administrator in the community school where we wanted it to be housed, because we didn't have a facility to provide this immersion program. And then the thought, I mean, it kind of coincides with being able to share resources and supports and utilize the administrative support, you know, trying to get this program off of the ground. It being a new concept in a sense, not new in a sense where our language was shared and learned from birth, but because of colonial impacts, colonization, we've all become accustomed to understanding the English educational program as the way to go. And so when we introduce our new concept of providing an immersion program that consists of our language, Anishinaabe, and our ways of knowing and doing, it took some work, and it's still taking some work. But I have seen growth and improvement and understanding and all of the above that comes with that. So it was struggling, and our administrator at the time had shared that this type of programming requires its own oversight. There needs to be a dedicated support there to ensure that the things that are needed to occur, the way that the vision entails. And he had said that my training, my education is in the Western ideology of way of doing things. And so he came forth and he had indicated that. And so we remember that, and so we presented to the leadership again of the day in 2018 that we need to have support that can provide oversight to our programming to help ensure its success, that is dedicated to the program completely. And so they appointed this, they put this in place in 2018. And so it wasn't until then really that this program had that dedicated oversight. And we have formed an immersion committee that provides guidance and awareness as an advisory group, you know. So that was a real good support too, that provides all kinds of benefits. You know, you're starting to open the door to networking. You're opening a door to ensure that more people are involved in the process, and that was always the piece there as well, to ensure that community is aware of all the activities that surround this program. And so for this particular committee, who was appointed was a former administrator. So there was that skill set and expertise there to help guide the program, to offer advice. A language teacher that was very involved in for some time. An individual that was involved in a lot of community language initiatives and programming, and a parent. So a parent that had a child that was in the immersion program was a part of the committee as well. And so the dynamic there and diversity there was good, and it complemented the overall effort, is what we found. So that was something that is in place up to this point, and where we are currently is that this school year was the beginning of our grade 5. So we have it starting at JK, and with the understanding that it would grow each additional year. So we're running from JK to grade 5 currently. And the grade 5 where we are in our community is that this is the beginning level where we start to really focus and introduce English courses. So this is the transition for them into some English programming. And so a lot of these things are very new to our students. We have been hit very hard like others with the pandemic. And so, that was a challenge that we faced. If we're trying to offer a program that is solely in one language, and you're learning a language, you can think of challenges that would occur currently in the classroom. Now we have to provide at-home remote learning opportunities for them to learn language. We send home work that is in the language, and then we have moms and dads and caregivers that struggle with it themselves. So it was just one thing after another. So we just try to do the best that we can and remain steadfast in our work that we do. But that's something that we all share, I feel. So the colonization, we're looking at decolonization approaches to the work that we're doing in our community for our programming. And how I shared this one time with our leadership was that we have just the term in itself, colonization. We have, people that are familiar with the idea, the context of it, but really how far and how deeply does it connect to us individually or as a people? Do we really understand that? And I look back to our ancestors at times when these visitors or newcomers had come to this land, and what they had brought was this wave of colonization that they had no control over. They couldn't stop any of it, and it just continued and carried on. And they would see this wave of colonization in their lifetime. And here we are today. And I still see that the colonization here, but for the most part, a lot of it now has become internalized. Where we're doing it to ourselves. We've become so accustomed and a part of this force that we struggle with it, and that provides a lot of challenges for us to face. But I think that if we can provide more opportunities for our people to become aware of this, it'll help with our growth and the work that we want to do. So if that is the case, if that truly is the case, then a way or a means to address it would be to provide opportunities for our memberships to have an understanding of this and how we've been impacted by it. And if I look directly, I see I'm running short of time here. At some of the challenges that we'll face, when we endeavor in this type of programming, first and foremost is the inventory, the speakers that we do have that are first speakers. They're generally elderly. This is a challenge that we face. This is why we're doing the work that we do to address this. We have provincial school education standards that are challenging. We have people that are very knowledgeable. There are Indigenous or Anishinaabe knowledge keepers and holders and sharers, but the only way that they could teach is if they carry this paper that says they can do so.
One more minute, Minogiizhgad. One more minute.
And then student environment. So even though we're a school within a school, we have that challenge of English. It's everywhere. It's surrounded. So we have to find a means to address that. We have lateral violence issues, and we have colonial policies. So these are reality. And but I have a friend in Hawaii who always said to us when he visited us, and he's still in contact with us in email, he says to remain steadfast. You must remain steadfast. And he's an inspiration in himself because of the work that they did in Hawaii, you know. So we have our work cut out for us. It's not just here, it's all over. And if there's anything that we can do, say or share, you know, to help each other, then that's our intent. So I'll just close with that for now. We know there's a lot more that could be shared, but we'll be good for now. Miigwech.
Minogiizhgad, Minogiizhgad, I'm just going to open the floor for a minute or two. If anyone has a question for Minogiizhgad, keep in mind that his contact information is in the presenters page on the website for the conference. So you could always contact him there. But is there anyone who'd like to make a comment or a question at this time? Is it Mike?
Yep.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Miigwech there, Minogiizhgad, for unwrapping that for you. And I really like the part that you talked about, if you could step back and do the early learners. So again, we've got our immersion kindergarten. We're trying to get speakers throughout our hub center, our early learning. But I think coming out of here, I can bring back the urgency for that to really make this work. Miigwech.
Thank you, Mike. Dara, you have a question?
Yeah, well, Liwen, for your sharing. It's a wonderful journey, and our community is just at the initial stages of doing the same thing. So we gained a lot from that. Just a quick question, I guess, is whether or not you saw a decrease in students as you move towards this immersion movement, or were parents behind you?
We have community support. When we first started, the number was high, and we did see a decrease. And in looking at evaluating the situation coming in, so I just came in as an immersion coordinator in February, and in looking at that and assessing that, talking to moms and dads, I think a big part that attributed to the decline was because of the lack of oversight that was provided to the program, and there wasn't a firm affirmation of commitment to ensure that this program is going to be ongoing. It might have been viewed as a pilot, and so what happens after a while? I mean, what's going to happen to my child? You know, are they going to all of a sudden have an end of a program and then they have to hop into? So there was a lot of uncertainties. And then so what I feel that is if you provide the proper promotion, update into community, I think what will happen and what we'll see is more confidence, I guess, in that it's here to stay. This is something that is going to continue.
Our next presenter is Sykes Powderface, and Sykes is a knowledge keeper from the Stoney Nakoda First Nation in Alberta. So we have Sykes on. His camera's not on, but he had mentioned that he is having a little bit of technical difficulty, but he's here. Sykes.
It certainly is an honor, and to do this, it's very much reconciliation has very much been, should I say, written all over me, because since the TRC came out, I've been involved in discussions on a lot of the actions that are called for, and and I find during my sessions, I've been involved in different groups. I've had I make presentations to energy and natural resources, governmental and corporate groups, and I've had the conferences that held 200, 250 corporate managers and so on, particularly on the area of energy. And this is where it was very difficult for people to really understand why we need to make changes. And then, of course, I work quite closely with education institutions where they're now looking at getting as much information as they can about reconciliation. What to do has been the question. Where do we go? Who do we contact? How do we reach the community? And then, of course, I got to go into the cultural traditions of protocols. You know, I've been telling them, look, you just don't barge into a community and talk to whoever you see. We have protocols. Those protocols are very strong and still exist. Know who you want to talk to. First of all, you got to know who you need to talk to in the community, whatever it is, whatever that you want to talk about. Because in these sessions, I find that reconciliation uh, not only applies to those in power, but also as individuals of society that falls into the 10 principles of the calls to action. There they're trying to find which of the 94 calls to action that they like to choose. And a lot of them have moved on in that. And right after that, the immediate reaction after the TRC call to action has been a get together with whoever they can find. And the first thing is always, oh, can I have coffee or dinner with you? And that is considered reconciliation. And then there's just getting elders to come and do blessings or ceremonies. And then life goes on after that. Where's the action? And the third one is discussions determining a role of the indigenous people in their plans for what is considered as truth and reconciliation. And this is always after the fact. Planning without sharing, involvement, or participation of the indigenous people in their areas of governance, territory, business, administration, or any area of interest that they might have that they want to work on. And and then after that, they say, well, I've got them involved. I talked to them, so now I can go on with continue doing what I'm doing. So in my plans, I'm going to determine this is the role I want them to play. That goes on. So what is reconciliation? The question that has been that I've been asked a lot of times is what is reconciliation? Is this reconciliation, or how things are being done or going on right now, or is it an introduction of a modern day colonial system called coexistence through municipal style of governmental relationships? This is going on right now. And unfortunately, those of us that know very little about our history are being conned into moving in this direction, unfortunately. And that is still making the indigenous people subject that need to live within existing legislation and control. And I know education is one. Education comes under, if we look at the legislation that controls education, you look at the BNA, the Act, when colonial system came in the division of powers, you could say that education, we have said it over and over again, including what we've done back in 1972 with the Indian Control of Indian Education document, which became a national document, that we need to go back to infuse our traditional methods of teachings in the education system so that our children, our students will have a better chance of success to compete in the non-Indigenous world. That is still going on because in the division of powers under Section 9124, the federal government has the authority to legislate for Indians and lands reserved for Indians. For Indians, it's encompassing of what do we need: education, health, housing, economic development. We can go on and on. But also in Section 92 is the provincial, specifically provincial responsibility that falls under social development. That includes education. Now, most of I may be wrong, I need to be corrected. I think most of the provinces do have their own particular education legislation, and that was always a problem. And and it's the unfortunate. So reconciliation has been I suppose, my pet subject, trying to put it in perspective. To do that, I've been sharing my experiences at the national level on the Constitution. And what I'm trying to do is not to say this is it. What I've been trying to do is develop a framework for the listeners to work with. And that includes going back into history right from the beginning of the first contact and what happened back then, and what transpired over time that got out of that process of the relationship building. And this is where not too many people have gone back and look at that. So I try to bring that to light because this is where much of my work in Ottawa as the lead spokesperson appointed by the Joint Council of the National Indian Brotherhood put me when I was elected Vice President of the National Indian Brotherhood, 1979 to 82. I had to go back. I had to learn about history from the elders that I was able to call in. As soon as in the absence of the president, I was appointed by the Joint Council of Chiefs to lead them into the negotiation talks. And I said, I need elders because I have learned from being involved in politics on treaty and Aboriginal rights with the Indian Association of Alberta from 1966 that the treaties is all I used to hear. Treaty rights is all that we used to hear from our elders at gatherings when they were dealing with government strategies to talk about what our relationship should be. So we relied, I relied so heavily on these elders across Turtle Island to ensure that we're not forgotten or left out of the Supreme Court of Canada, that Canada was asking for from the United Kingdom. This would have, if we were left out of it, this would have been disregarding the existing Aboriginal and treaty rights, to our status, lands, natural resources of the universe. Elders and knowledge keepers wanted to make sure that we are the original peoples who are connected to the land, natural resources that provided all our needs, our food, shelter, clothing, medicines, and a place to talk to the Creator. They wanted to make sure that is protected in the Constitution. And this is why I said, okay, I had to go back and learn from nature's greatest professors. And those were the elders who recall what had happened, what was supposed to have happened. And I've learned their oral, cultural, and spiritual knowledge, experience, and wisdom has always been the foundation that we were able to use at the national level to counteract government strategies on to say that, treaties are not surrendered. Our elders have always said that according to the Creator's law, we govern all our relationship to live in peace and harmony with nature and all peoples. It is our responsibility to live in peace and it is our responsibility to share the surface of the land. And this was very, very critical as to what they were willing to share under the Creator's law, as we see on the Declaration in that second part. Is the Creator gave us laws that govern all our relationship to live in harmony with nature and mankind. And and this is where they said, we are part of the land. How can we surrender part of ourselves to somebody? It can't be. And it is our responsibility to share the surface of the land so they can grow their food and feed for them and their livestock, a place where they can have a place to rest their heads. And this is what the elders have said. We welcome them. We welcome them. We did not say, go away. And then, of course, there's always that joke about how Quebec got its name. You may have heard that. People have said, well, because they were infringing upon their lands, the Mohawks have told them, go back. And they thought that that's where, go back. It was a very, very learning experience working with a national body of elders from different First Nations across Canada during the talks in the Constitution. This was very educational and powerful to learn from, as I said, nature's professors. They always refer to nature as their source of understanding, their source of concepts, their source of whatever they need to do in dealing with problems and so on. And this guy, it was the elders who provided advice, guidance, and relationship concepts and perceptions that put matters in perspective that treaties are peace, friendship, respect, and harmony. They shared commonalities. In their talks, we just sat there and listened to what they have to talk about and what they want in the Constitution. They shared commonalities like the meaning of the treaties. There are different treaties, which I did not realize until I got there. There were different treaties, different arrangements. Some of them call it covenants, and some of them are just simply a marriage. And this is how they put it, a marriage. And I often wonder why. And the word comes from when our elders talk about these agreements, this relationship with the newcomers is like a marriage. It's like a marriage. And one of the foundations of the spirit intent of the treaties is another subject that they discuss amongst themselves. And then, of course, they talked about the intended relationship after contact. And this is where we're now at in reconciliation. What started back then, if we look at all that's recorded, particularly the Two-Row Wampum document, that because that was used, and that's what we use as the base of our arguments in the Constitution, was the Two-Row Wampum. We had to look at the Two-Row Wampum Treaty because up to that time, the governments were saying, how do we know? Because you don't have anything written on record. And this is where the Two-Row Wampum came in. The belt was spread out for governments, people to look at. And they said, here it is. There's our writing. This is the way we make treaties. This is the way we live in peace and harmony with each other. We recognize and respect each other, who they are. And this is what the Two-Row Wampum belt means. They couldn't argue against that. because now they see it. And then they brought forward the records of negotiations, with the what should have happened after that. And then we also know that after the first handshake, an indigenous way of this was indigenous way of expressing peace, friendship, and welcome. It's always that handshake. Following the welcome, there was discussions on how to get along with each other. As recorded and recalled by the elders' oral history, the discussions to form a relationship agreement, the visitors wanted to label the relationship as father and son, which the indigenous people disagreed. They said, no, pardon me, I've been trying to say this in Mohawk, is that Hananosani, I think that's the way they pronounce it, disagreed, but to address each other as brothers, to indicate in their traditional cultural way to recognize each other as equal. And this was the difference between the two concepts that we've been living under now that gave us all those problems. They still wanted to address us as children, as in some of the treaty documents. It said that we, after we surrender the land and titles and everything else, that we would be subjects of the crown, to be legislated. And I guess that's why the British North America Act was worded in Section 9124, that Parliament had the authority to legislate for Indians and lands reserved for Indians. So this is just a little bit about that. And what we see from that, we note where the process, we need to go back into looking at what was supposed to be the process of building this relationship. First of all, if it's like a marriage, you know, I've raised some challenges to group processions on this one. What are the elders talking about when they said the treaties or any relationship agreement is like a marriage? You look at it and I would say, gosh, you know, when I first met my wife, we didn't get married right away. It took us time, number of years to get to know each other first. That's the process that I see as being called as action by the TRC. We need to sit down and talk to each other, get to know each other. And this is exactly what was recorded in that meetings between the newcomers and the Haudenosaunee. Pardon me, I don't think I said that. In their discussion in 1613.
1 more minute, Sykes.
1613, as recorded in the discussions. That's when the newcomers said, okay, they were going to label this relationship as father. People disagreed, and they said, no, that's not the way we address each other. We maintain our relationship. It's brothers. We're equal because we all belong to the same Mother Earth. You know, it's interesting to go back into that one. And this is where we need to look at it. We need to take a look at when we're dealing with what reconciliation is. We need to look at marriage. People stay married, but there are times if they can't get along, there's always that legal ways of separation, hoping to reconcile their differences, to come back together. So I use that quite a bit to say there was a separation That separation was in continued talks, communication. That was separated by the colonial rule because of the influx of more people onto Turtle Island. There had to be some control, and the government or the United Kingdom decided to give Canada some legislation that they can work with, so that they know that through these agreements, they have a responsibility to work with, to build a relationship with the Indigenous people of this land.
With that, Sykes, I'm going to have to discontinue your talk. It's awesome. I'm learning a lot. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. But we have to be back in the planetarium within 3 minutes or so. So before we leave, I'm going to remind everyone to please fill out the evaluation form that's also found on our website, and it's also in our chat. I'm going to open up the floor in a second if anyone wants to contact Sykes. His information is also in our website under National Conference in the presenters. The door prize will be being drawn in a few minutes in the plenary, so I encourage you to go back there. But before we go back in about 2 minutes, does anyone have any questions or comments for Sykes? It's an awesome presentation, very informative. Anyone have any questions or comments?
I guess I left. I guess I answered all the questions that they had. But I want to leave them. I want to leave with this. Now, if you look at the Constitution and with the Declaration, sections 25 in particular and 35 are all in the Declaration, is the base of those sections in the Constitution. If you look at the language, if you look at the intent, which was developed by the elders in 1981, that's in the Constitution. So anybody who wants to follow that, you know, I'd certainly like to work with them, because you look at the words existing, recognition, affirmation, and then the charter, the way it's written, in section 25, it's item 4 of the Declaration on for Nations. I think it was for that no laws of Canada or the province, almost word for word, is in section 25, including the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the Constitution of Canada, shall hereinafter be construed or applied so as to abrogate, abridge, or diminish the rights specified in sections 1 and 3 of this part. And then, of course, the first part is all those rights and freedoms recognized by the Royal Proclamation. I want to leave them with that. Take a look at that. And this is where we're at. We need to build on the actions of continued communication. Without communication, there's no negotiation. Without negotiation, there is no rebuilding or reconciliation. I want to leave with that. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sykes. I really appreciate all your knowledge and experience with that. So